All right, welcome everyone, especially all you UPSC aspirants. In this explainer, we are going to build the foundational roadmap of the Indian Constitution's history. Seriously, understanding this timeline is absolutely crucial. It's the bedrock of the entire Indian polity syllabus. So let's get right into it. Okay, so this quote really sets the stage. It all kicked off with a trading company, the East India Company. They showed up in the 1600s with something called a royal charter from the Queen of England, which basically gave them a monopoly on trade with the East. At first, their goal was pretty simple, just do business. But, over the next century and a half, things started to change. A lot. The company got really good at playing Indian kingdoms against each other. And this power shift splits neatly into two different eras. First, the period of company rule, and then the direct rule of the British Crown. We're going to break down both. Now, let's talk about the year 1765. This was a massive turning point. After a huge military win at the Battle of Buxar, the Mughal emperor gave the company a new power, and this power would change its very nature, forever. That power was the Diwani. This gave them the right to collect taxes and handle civil cases in some of India's richest provinces, Bengal, Bihar, and Orissa. And just like that, the company's transformation was complete. It wasn't just a business anymore. For all practical purposes, it was now a government. So you have these company officials like Robert Clive, going back to Britain with just insane amounts of wealth. This, of course, raised a lot of eyebrows back in London. The British Parliament knew it had to do something to regulate the super powerful and, let's be honest, increasingly corrupt private company. Their first big move was the Regulating Act of 1773. And this act was a total landmark. It created the post of Governor General of Bengal to centralize everything. It set up a Supreme Court in Calcutta for some legal oversight. And it tried to make the company answerable to someone back home through a new governing body called the Court of Directors. Then they fine-tuned this control with Pitt's India Act of 1784, which brought in this really clever double government system. The whole idea was to split up the company's jobs. The company's own court of directors could keep handling the business side of things, but a new, powerful, government-appointed board of control would now manage all the political, military, and money matters. Britain was basically taking over the government parts of the job. After that came a whole series of charter acts, and with each one, the British government tightened its grip just a little bit more. If you look closely, you can see the trend, right? The 1813 Act got rid of the company's trade monopoly. The 1833 Act centralized all power under a new title, the Governor General of India. And then, super importantly, the 1853 Act started to separate the lawmaking and executive jobs, a core idea of modern government that we see in our own constitution today. But then, 1857 happened. The Great Revolt, which many of us know as the First War of Independence, was like a political earthquake. It shook the very foundations of British rule and forced them to totally rethink their entire way of governing India. The British government had to ask itself some tough questions. How on earth did this happen? And maybe more importantly, how do we make absolutely sure it never, ever happens again? The only answer was a complete system overhaul. And that answer came in the form of the Government of India Act of 1858. This act was swift and decisive. It completely abolished the East India Company, got rid of the whole double government system, and transferred every last bit of power directly to the British Crown. The era of company rule was officially over. You can see this massive change in a new title. The Governor General was now called the Viceroy. And this wasn't just some fancy name change. It meant that this person was the direct, personal representative of the British king or queen in India. It really cemented the crown's direct control. So let's jump into this new era of crown rule and see how things develop. After the huge shock of 1857, the British had a really important realization. There was no way they could govern this massive country without at least some cooperation from Indians. So, the number one lesson the British took away from 1857 was this. The revolt happened because Indians felt totally shut out of their own government. There was no way for them to voice their concerns. This had to change, at least on the surface. So the Indian Councils Act of 1861 took the first, and I mean very small step. It allowed the Viceroy to nominate 3 Indians to his legislative council. And these were usually loyal princes or landlords. It was a start, but a purely symbolic one. This policy of slow, gradual inclusion kept going for decades. And then the Indian Councils Act of 1909 marked a pretty big jump in numbers, expanding the Central Legislative Council from only 16 members to 60. This allowed for more Indians to be involved, even if their power was still very limited. But here's the thing. While it looked like they were giving representation with one hand, they were actively planting seeds of division with the other. And for all you aspirants, this is a critical point for your exams. So, the most destructive part of the 1909 Act, which you might also know as the Morley-Minto reforms, was the introduction of separate electorates. What did this mean? It meant that Muslims would only vote for Muslim candidates in special constituencies. Many historians point to this exact moment as when communalism was formally written into law and became a part of Indian politics. The last major act on our timeline is the Government of India Act of 1919, also called the Montagu-Chelmsford Reforms. This one brought in some major structural changes that you'll probably recognize as precursors to our system today: a two-house legislature, or bicameralism, and direct elections for the very first time. All of this came with the promise of a gradual move towards responsible government. And that really brings us to the question I want to leave you with. This whole journey, from a simple trading company to the direct rule of the crown, shows the British slowly giving Indians more seats at the table. But did they ever give them any real power? The important decisions remained firmly in their hands, which, of course, set the stage for the final, intense phase of the freedom struggle. So think about it. Did they give Indians a place in the room, but ultimately deny them a real voice? That's definitely something to chew on as you move to the next chapter of your studies.